evening, everyone. I would like to call the Schenectady City Council Committee meeting for Monday, November the 2nd, 2020 to order. And we'll go into finance. Mr. Palomini.
Order Finance Committee. The first item on the agenda is a call for a public hearing for the Upper Union Street Business Improvement District. I believe we have Mr. DeCoco with us tonight.
Yes, I'm here. This is Chris DeCoco from the Upper Union Street bid. Hi, everyone.
Hello. My understanding you were going to present your budget?
Yes. Has everyone got a copy of the 2021 budget?
Yes, we do.
Okay. This is a presentation, the 2021 budget. I also provided a recap year-to-date of 2020 budget versus actual. And we took the 2021 plan off of what was really happening for 2021 based on the 2020. Obviously, the pandemic hit some of our businesses hard. And what we had intended for some stronger than usual advertising campaigns didn't play out the way we had hoped, because for quite some time we weren't sure that promoting businesses that were at half capacity was a good plan for the dollar. So we now have a bigger push for 2021 to do as much, if not more, advertising of the street. If you remember, years ago, we used to do festivals on the street, and we're grateful that we didn't have any of those planned except for our holiday tree lighting, which we're hoping for Small Business Saturday this year. But with the pandemic and small group large group gatherings not available, we were grateful that we didn't have any of those planned for 2020. Snow removal, scholarship, landscaping. We found a great landscaper who has helped us maintain the parking lot and the street from Van Antwerp to Garner. Regular review, regular maintenance, cleaning up the street, trimming down weeds, keeping the corner of Dean Street looking well and trimmed, and no weeds, no debris. We've done a great job with our executive director to stay on top of other properties too, ones that have kind of fallen off and aren't as tended to that we'd like to. So we've stayed on top of them to do what they can to keep their properties looking well.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Mr. Palomini?
Go ahead.
Just curiosity, who is the executive director now?
Amanda Mahar. It was Shane Mahar's wife. Shane used to be on our board before he went back to the state. Amanda.
Are there any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. DeCoco. And again, this is a call for a public hearing.
All right. Sounds good. Nothing else from me?
Nope. I think we're all set. Thank you.
All right. I'll sign off. Thanks, guys. Enjoy your night.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is a call for a public hearing.
Don't you need a motion, Mr. Palomini?
We have
Oh,
to
yes.
move it.
Sorry.
I'll move it.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Yeah.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Next is the call for a public hearing for the downtown Schenectady Assessment District budget. This again is a call for a public hearing. I believe we have Ms. Peterson on the line.
Hello, everyone. It's Heather here.
Historically, we present our budget to the council around the week of the 15th, and we are on track to do that. We had an excellent board meeting today to walk through our upcoming budget, so we're on track to deliver it to you for your consideration on the 16th.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I'll move this.
Have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. Next is the authorization for the mayor to enter a contract with Hamilton Hill Arts Center for $30,000. Mr. Gray.
My apologies, I was muted. So the Hamilton Hill Art Center submitted a request to utilize CDBG funding to do some Black Lives Matter artwork. They plan on dispersing it throughout the city. They plan on using some of the funds also to support an 8-week youth program that will address some of the issues surrounding race and in our city. We're just asking you to authorize us to use $30,000 of CDBG funds to allow them to do that.
Are there any questions? Is there a motion?
Wait, can I ask a question first?
Yeah, go ahead.
What year are these funds coming from? Are these leftover funds from last year, or are they coming up funds?
Yeah, they're 2018 funds. Would have been for program year 2019. Our summer programs for last summer obviously didn't happen because of COVID. So we reallocated and reprogrammed that money to this.
Okay. All right. I can make the motion if you want, Mr. Palmini.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks.
Call to order public safety. The first item, discussion of safety and signage in Central Park. Ms. Perazzo.
Yes, I believe we have a neighbor on the call tonight also that Mr. Mutaviran asked to come onto the call, but I just wanted to express my concern with the violence in Central Park. It is a park that is well used and of course has people of all ages, children to adults, and this brazen violence, gun violence, is of great concern. And while we were at it, I just wanted to talk about the lack of signage in the park. I know that the Coalition Against Smoking gives free signs. Our parks are non-smoking. We don't seem to have signage that indicates that. There's no prevalent signage or redundant signage that says the park closes at dusk. For our police officers to use as backup for them. But I'm so concerned it's just anyone getting hurt is terrible, but just imagining a child getting hurt by accident is just so distressing to me. It's the center of our city, and certainly we don't want to see violence anywhere ever. But in a park where children are playing is just of such concern. So I just, I'm sure my other council members, or I would imagine the other council members are concerned. And if we could get our sign shop to make some signage and get some increased patrols or something, but I certainly would like to hear what the person that lives this on a daily basis is experiencing also.
Yeah, Mr. So what we did, some of us might have received a call from one of the residents living in the Bradley, Jeremy Hughes, and I invite him to kind of brief the council on what is going on around the basketball court. So, Jeremy, would you mind address the council briefly on what is going on around the neighborhood there and at the basketball court?
Certainly. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I will say, just to start off, that I fully believe the Schenectady Police Department is overworked, overwhelmed, and I know they're doing the best that they can. I'm well aware of that. However, the lack of security in that park for anybody is overwhelming to me. As soon as it gets dusk, if you will, it's a different world down there. The problem is, though, that a lot of times at dusk, there's still a lot of people in that park. And because of that, there's a lot of incidences, if you will. I live just up the street from the basketball courts. I know of at least 3 shootings that, reported or not reported, this summer alone. The issue that I have is that how many times there has to be one shooting before someone innocent gets killed or gets injured in any way, shape, or form? There's no cameras down there. There's no type of security lights down there. There's just nothing. It's dark. So if people want to walk through there at night, or, you know, and even in the morning when I'm walking in the morning in the park, it's pitch black. You can't, anybody could be hanging around, and it's not safe in any way, shape, or form for me or for any one of my neighbors. My issue really comes down to is there's got to be a better way to be more vigilant about how to keep it safer. And instead of being, you know, I'd rather be proactive than retroactive in this case. And I don't know all the answers by any means. I just know that we need to do something. If it's finding ways and funds and writing grants to find ways to get more lighting down there, whatever the case may be. I have heard that Schenectady is a smart community, or in the process of becoming a smart community. So I do know that there are some possibilities of things moving forward in the summertime of next year, and that's great. But again, my concern goes back to is the safety in that park is really questionable at best for me as a resident that lives right up the hill. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you for briefing us on what's going on out there. As far as, I don't see Mayor McCarthy or anybody from his office on, so we could ask him. What I can do, I can follow up with an email to him and to ask him what safety measure or signage can be put in the park, and we can follow back in 2 weeks.
And again, if there's nothing there that says the park closes at dusk, then how do we defend that? You know, I mean, obviously the police can order people out, but I just feel like at least if it's there, it's like, look, there's a sign. It says you got to get out of here. You know, it just is. It's scary.
Mr. Mudavaren?
Go ahead, please.
So I have to agree that we definitely, you know, this summer spent a lot of time in the park, walking, playing tennis. So I agree that there is not a lot of signage, except the one that says "Don't feed the ducks." I noticed that. There's not a lot of signage that tells people that, you know, like even in terms of playing tennis, like what time you have to. I think that may be the only place, and somebody actually made that sign to put on the fence to say that you need to leave at 7:30. We shouldn't have to have people make signs to put up. So we definitely need signage that just kind of govern what behavior is and is not acceptable in the park. So, you know, we do a lot. I know that Mr. Coluccio, that's under his department, and I know that there's a lot going on there right now, but we definitely need signage because people still utilize the park, as the gentleman said, to walk in the morning, to maybe even walk in the evening. So we definitely need that. And in terms of the large gatherings, because generally around the basketball courts, I've seen large gatherings, and several have been reported, which I've passed on when the weather was actually nicer, at the basketball court. And I actually had concerns that we put up every single net at the basketball court, you know, in the midst of COVID. So I think that we definitely need to take some measures that lessen the amount of people that gather, and especially after a certain hour, that people need to know that they need to leave the park and not be there. So I really cannot say enough that we definitely need more signage on many levels about what is not acceptable behavior in the park.
Mr. Mudavaren?
Go ahead, please.
So I have had this conversation with the mayor about putting lights up in and around the park. I believe that it is in one of the budgets, and I'm not sure if it's part of the smart cities or not, but I know that they do have some temporary lighting that has been used in the past. I'm not sure if that's an immediate solution, but maybe that's something we could look into to get some temporary lighting up in the park. Just because it is, as everyone has noted, it is extremely dark in the park, and I've been asking for lights in the park for several years now, so hopefully we can get something accomplished over maybe before the winter sets in, or at worst case scenario in the spring.
What I can do, we can follow up with the mayor and try to see what lighting or signage can be placed there in the near future to avoid some of these incidents. We can have this back on the agenda for a follow-up in 2 weeks so that we see some movement in this. Another question, Mr. Wallen is online. Mr. Wallen, there is your office and you are in discussion with a group of people to with regards to signage. Is that for the entire park or just for a section?
You said signage?
Yes.
Yeah, it is for the entire park.
How are you with that in terms of discussion and coming to a solution?
Well, we have a game plan put together, and we may do some of it this year. It just kind of came down to budget. When we were prioritizing capital budgets, to do it to the plan that we had, it was a pretty involved plan. It involved going beyond. I'm not going to say the capabilities of our Shine Shop, but I would say that it would be a pretty involved project. We would put it out to there's several local Shine Shops in the Capital District. That was the idea, to have that continuing a little bit more professional look to getting in. We still may be able to do something. One of the target areas was Fair at Gulf Road. When you come off, we actually I managed to get the DOT to change signs. I don't know if you noticed that. We have new signs now. We have signs on 890 pointing to Central Park to exit 7. And then on 7 at Gulf, we have signs now that say Central Park. So that was all part of that roll-off, and the DOT did that for us. But now we're getting into the park, but it's a cost. And this whole budget process was paring down costs and focusing on what was important. So I can talk with Anthony and see, but we have a plan. It's just that, once again, when you're trying to put things down to the brass tacks, that was something that we didn't feel was a priority.
Follow up on that. I appreciate that. But isn't this group also going to be helping with the funding of these signs?
Which group are you talking to me? What group?
Yeah, there's a group that your discussion is centered around with regards to Ms. Monagola group where they're looking to help with the signage.
Yeah, I haven't talked to Ms. Gold about that yet. I know that she may be able to contribute, but I don't know if she's looking to, the whole park isn't. She's more focused on the Music Haven aspect of it. But, we're also looking to bring more tournaments and things to A Diamond. And so, it's a concerted effort because the park is getting utilized to such an extent, but it's a big undertaking.
Okay. Well, we can follow up in 2 weeks with this item and get some more explanation on the way forward and signage and provide safety to the park. Thank you.
Okay.
The next item is a discussion of residential parking permit. We had this several weeks for discussion, and we have shared some documents. I asked Mr. Colden to give me a brief of what steps the council need in order to put this in place. And Mr. Colden, I know you sent me that email, but would you mind give the council a brief on what is needed?
I can.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. So generally, parking in any municipality across the state is governed by what New York State has allowed. The way the courts have viewed it is that the right to use a public highway for any purpose rests with the people of the state, not with the inhabitants of a municipality. So if we were planning to do a residential parking permit program in the city, and we were going to be using city streets as that parking resource, we would need enabling legislation from the state to allow us to do it. The particular section of law, Vehicle and Traffic Law, Section 1640-B, and subsequent sections within that, goes up to M right now, contain the applicable laws granting the specific municipalities the power to have a residential parking system. As an example, more recently, the state passed a law granting the city of Albany a 2-year trial program. They called it a pilot program. It actually expires in, I think, April of 2021. It hasn't officially been extended as something permanent. The only way Albany was able to do it, to have that enabling legislation, was that they had to agree to a 2-year program. Part of that had to do with some pushback, from what I read, from I think it may have been the union for the state employees. The state employees have been enjoying free parking for such a long time, and then to unroll a permit program that would have a fee attached to it, I think there was some pushback from the union. So as it pertains to the city of Schenectady, my recommendation would be that we first reach out to our state representatives to tell them that we are thinking about perhaps doing a residential parking permit program, maybe provide some type of overview of what we're looking to do, not necessarily a full framework, but just a general idea of an outline of what we'd like to see happen, and then go from there. But we can't do anything until the state provides us with legislation allowing us to move it ahead.
Thank you. Ms. Patrick?
Thank you. So we did receive emails from residents. I think we all received the same emails from in different locales within the city that I think started this discussion. And I do have a question for Mr. Colden. So I understand that we have to go through the state in order to do something, but would we be able to at least think about this and think, because I think the framework is going to be very complex from everything that I've looked at. Can we at least start going on something like that so that we're ready to have something to present to the state, or is it do you go to the state first? Can you explain that a little bit better for me?
Sure. As I said, I think it would be helpful for us to have a framework of, generalized sense of what we want to do, the parameters of, the applicable parts of the city. Is this going to apply citywide? Is this just going to be downtown? And, that would be, I think, a conversation to be had with, obviously the mayor's office. It'd be a question for the police department. They should be involved. Obviously, the Chris Wallen, the engineer, should be involved, and a host of others should obviously be involved. And then obviously the council will obviously have to be involved. So I think putting something together, coming up with a general, sense of what the city, what the council would like to do in terms of, what this program would look like. At the end of the day, from what I've reviewed of the state law, the state has essentially set up their parameters for having a parking program in terms of what streets apply. That's just from what I've reviewed. I haven't reviewed every single section, but I was looking at Albany specifically. They talk about the specific, streets from this street to that street. These are the parking program will apply here. So part of that has to do with, I think, what the state is willing to do, but we should be telling the state, obviously, what we would like to see happen. Obviously, There will eventually have to be a public hearing and all of that down the line, but that's after we have the enabling legislation from the state to allow us to move it forward.
Gotcha. I mean, I think, you know, in terms of some of the emails that we got, I think that the new passport parking, as well as COVID, keeping people in their homes, so a lot of folks aren't leaving during the day to drive their cars to work. So I think there's been some concern around that as well, that those have been some of the background questions that have led us to this point.
Any other suggestion from my colleague?
So I do need a clarification, Mr. McVeigh.
Go ahead, please.
Are we, I know that especially around the hospital, and around the school, which I'm not sure if that was Oneida, I think it was over there, that where people were having concerns. Is that the area, is that basically the kind of areas that we're talking about, where people are having difficulties on those side streets? Is that a yes?
Yes. I think that, yeah. We have received several complaints from that area also, and other area across the city, the Stockade and Dongchong. And those are primarily the areas that will be focused on if we decide to move forward with it.
So this would only apply to those particular areas and not throughout the city?
That would be part of what we would be determining in our discussions. Whether, I think that when I've looked at Albany, for example, there's been zones for this kind of thing. So those are the kinds of things that would have to be part of our discussions.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Patrick, we can start the discussion from the mayor's office through the police department, the engineering department, and Mr. Colgan's office, and see where we can move forward with this.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah. So I will try to set up those start those conversations.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. The next item is excessive speeding. Ms. Porterfield.
Yes, thank you. So I brought this up several times, and of course the speeding continues. And I know that we put money in the budget to put the removal of those speed humps in. However, that's probably going to be a little bit longer before we do that. And so the concerns are that, you know, that we just have a lot of speeding. So I have been asked by a couple of neighborhoods, actually, if stop signs could be like four-way stop signs at particular intersections can be put up. The feedback that I did get is that, you know, there has to be a traffic study and a lot of things has to happen before that can be done. However, I think that given what's been going on and people are complaining that I don't know that we have time, I'm very concerned that there's going to be a loss of life accident as a result of this continuous speeding throughout the city. So I'd like to see us to be able to at least get some stop signs put in at these some of the four-way stops where there's first of all there's a lot of children that live in the particular areas, and we could also have signs that say children at play. Michigan Avenue, for instance, let me use that as an example. The person was going so fast, you may remember a couple of years ago, that they left the road and actually went into someone's home. But fortunately, no one got hurt, but they actually literally ended up in a room in someone's home because they were just going so fast they left the street. So, you know, we really need to really address this. Also coming off 890, going to California Avenue is another area where people just come flying through. So I don't really know how you do that particular one, but there are places that people are just, because there's no stop signs, they just go straight through, and there's no stop lights, and there's long stretches of street where they can just go all the way through, and nothing stops them unless, unfortunately, another vehicle or person gets in the way. So I know that we may not get to the speed humps, I said again, because we have to order and do all these kind of things and discuss that and public hearing and all of that. But for these areas where people are driving into homes, on Page Street, there was 3 accidents, and all of them ended up in someone's backyard or in someone's home. So we really need to take a look at putting up some stop signs as a more passive measure right now. People, I believe, most people do observe stop signs, but we need to take measures, immediate measures to start to address this. And I would like to request that we start to do that and request it of the mayor's office that we start putting these stop signs up. We can look at the particular areas that already had accidents. We can look at where the residents are complaining, like on the north side. I can't remember the name of the street, but on the north side, we could start looking at the places where we're getting those specific complaints and start putting up stop signs so we can at least start doing some traffic calming measures. So that it would be my request to start from the mayor's office. And if, Mr. Rivera.
Go ahead, please.
No, I was up to you to ask if anybody else had comments, so. Or feedback.
Yeah. Any feedback from
Mr. Mutivaran?
Go ahead, please.
Just agree that this is of great concern. You know, we when we go door to door, it's prevalent on freshly paved streets, right? So people are concerned about the quality of the street. We pave it, and then it becomes a speedway. But there's got to be some sort of solution out there to help, because we know where the red zones are, and obviously we can't have a police officer sitting there, day after day. So I support trying to take any measure we can.
Ms. Patrick?
Yes, I just want to add my support for this. Just walking around or driving around, no matter what street I'm on, it seems as though you see so many people speeding. And it's, incredibly dangerous, especially for folks that are walking or riding their bicycles as well on our streets. So I agree with that we need to start looking into it.
Mr. Mutivaran?
Go ahead, please.
So I know we have those signs that say how fast you're going, and I think that can help to deter them. And I've seen them scattered about the city, and I was in hopes that maybe we could utilize those signs in some of these areas that seem to be the hot spots or the newly paved areas to try to slow people down so they realize how fast they're going. Just a suggestion. I know that, we did vote on purchasing, Ms. Porterfield's, I don't want to say they're just hers, but they're her suggestion on the speed humps. But I think those signs may also assist in trying to slow some of the traffic down throughout the city. And they can be moved about.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think this was an item that we need to address. Speeding, we have seen an increase in speeding. We have seen an increase in complaints from residents. Ms. Porterfield, do you want us to follow up with the police department in terms of Ms. Karen mentioned about the signage and asking if they can place these signage at different locations so we can be able to identify and help them with the location?
Right. I think that would be a
solution.
Right. I think that's a great idea, and actually the police have been cooperative. I know the particular neighborhood one that I'm speaking of, where the neighbor complained, the police brought one of the signs, put it up, and people knew how fast they were going. And I think that's great to make people aware, but I definitely think we need something to make people just stop. Because unfortunately, some people, it seems like when they get to the sign, let me say how fast I can really make that sign go. How far, and then if it's so can I make it get up to 50 or whatever? So I think that's good to make people aware. I also think we need to combine that with something that specifically says, you must stop here, like stop sign. So I think both measures are good because we really have to address this, and whatever it takes to do that is what we need to do until we're really ready to put something in that's a little bit more permanent in terms of speed humps, or which won't be permanent, but something that actually slows traffic down because you have no options. So I suggest both the signs. I agree with both the signs, the moving signs, and also having stop signs put in.
Mr. Mutivaran?
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'd like to suggest that the council take under study looking at reducing the speed limit in neighborhoods to 25 miles an hour. We can keep the main roads at 30 miles an hour and look at changing the neighborhood roads to 25 miles an hour. Certainly that's not going to fully stop speeders, but it will hopefully get people to slow down a little bit. Granted, with the signs, yes, people will go faster to see how high they can get the speed to hit. And with the humps, people are going to go fast to try to get a little bit of air. So maybe reducing the speed limit. And then that would also, if they were to be caught, would increase the penalty for speeding in the city.
Thank you. So, Ms. Porterfield, we're going to follow up with the mayor's office, the police department, in terms of providing these location, and we can go talk to them about deploying these speed signs.
I will follow up with an email, Mr. Newberry, and include the council on that.
Yeah, please.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
The next item is sidewalk on Schenectady Street, adjacent to Jerry Burrell Park. Ms. Porterfield.
Yes, thank you. I brought this item up a couple of weeks ago because initially we had talked about it, and it hadn't been a part of the capital project that was being done at Jerry Burrell, putting sidewalks around Jerry Burrell. And so my request is to extend a little bit further because there are two residential properties that would take it almost to Albany Street, but because, not all the way, because some of it is owned by the community builders. But we're suggesting or asking that we extend it so this doesn't look like a real hodgepodge is what it currently looks like. It really looks fabulous. I must say that the contractors did a wonderful job around Jerry Burrell Park. It looks really great. And then you get to another part and then it looks really bad. And then towards the end of the street, it looks a little bit better. That we'd be able to do that. I know that there was some concern that we should not be doing things in front of residential properties, and that, you know, we just like choose certain places. But what I'm suggesting is that we're doing a project already, that we should just go ahead and finish that if it includes a couple of residential properties. It's not the whole process of a sidewalk program where people have to sign and do all of that. And actually, that probably would not work in this instance because it only involves a couple of people. So I would suggest that we do that. We've already done that with the project that's taking place on Crane Street. We paved in front of a funeral home, we paved in front of what appears to be a church, and then we also paved in front of a couple of residential homes. So I would suggest that we do that. Mr. Wallen, thank you very much, provided for us what the cost would be, $27,275. In CDBG funds. And I want to point out that not all of that is in front of residential property, but only $9,500 of that is actually the residential property. The remainder of that $27,000 is already city properties, the shore property. So I would like to see us go ahead and approve that and get this other sidewalk laid to the point where it comes up to the community builders' property, because they're going to then, when they build, put in new sidewalks. So that is, you know, that's what I'm opening up for discussion, and I would really like to see us move forward on that.
Mr. Mutaveran?
Go ahead, please.
I've been very vocal in my concern about cherry picking residences for receiving sidewalks where other streets have to pay and, you know, organize and all of that. However, learning that this occurred in the Orchard Park redo as well, to me sets less of a precedent because we already said it. We already proved that. And when we're going to have an entire stretch of the street, once community builders is done, with brand new sidewalks, save two residences, it just makes no sense to me. And so I suppose there's an exception to every rule, but the thing that brings this one home for me is having that continuum, and also the fact that we've already done it. As a council, we've already passed that. So I would be supportive if the rest of the council is ready to move forward.
Mr. Wallen, if you don't mind, can you walk us through the estimates, and if the council were to approve this, what's the timeline we're looking for and the overall cost?
Hold on one second. I'm just looking at the estimate. The timeline is up in the air right now. It snowed a couple days ago, and it's going to be 60s this weekend. So if it's approved, I'll get with our contractor, Louisi, and their subcontractor, 1 Cent Building, and I'll see what they say. You can blanket concrete and get things done that way. I'm not 100% that this needs to be, to rush to that extent. I mean, it's November. If it's green and you have homeowners putting salt on it, it could, hurt the integrity of it. We don't really salt the city park sidewalks. We don't have a crew that does that. But I mean, if you want to do it this year, we can. It's nothing that we can't. We just need to blanket it and possibly heat it and get on their schedule. Like Ms. Porterfield said, there's only 2 property owners. Some of it is ours. So it's up to what the council wants to do. And if you want to do it this year and you want to expedite it, we'll try to expedite it as soon as possible.
What about the rest of the council members feeling on this? If you don't mind.
So, Mr.
Is there support to move forward with this?
Mr. Mudavera,
Go ahead,
Karen. Okay,
ahead,
so I'm looking at the budget and I looked at the property and it looks like 314, 318 it appears that there's some empty lots in there. It looks like it's all the same owner. It looks like it's 3 lots and there's 1 individual with 3 lots on it. Like I said, there's a sidewalk program that we've put in place, and I'm very supportive of the sidewalk program. My concern is that we have an empty lot that, what do we do about curb cuts? And, look, it appears that they just drive over. Right now, it's a parking area. So that's my concern.
Mr. Motivaran, can I address that?
Go ahead, please.
The empty lot that you're talking about sits on the corner of Albany Street and Schenectady Street, and that is the property of the community builders. Because there is no empty lot between the end of Jerry Burrell Park and the last house. There is a space that the homeowners of, I can't remember the name, Mr. Wallen, of the Johnson family, it's on there, owns, and that is their property, but it's not an empty lot. So the only empty lot belongs to the community builders right now that people may use for parking, may not. But the other area that's just past Jerry Burrell Park is property that's owned by the people who have that house there. And in terms of the sidewalk program, I'll say again that this really does not fit well into the sidewalk program because we're just talking about 2 properties, because the rest are city properties. So the whole, going down the street and asking for signatures and all that, it really doesn't fit here because we've done the majority of the street simply because the majority of the street is the park.
Yeah, and just to add to that, as a reference to Queen Street, when we approved the contract there to redo the sidewalk along the Orchard Park, we ended up redoing the sidewalk with several business and residential properties. So, these 3 properties along Schenectady 6th Street, Jerry Burrell Park, I think we can make an exception here and do this, and I'm in support of this.
Mr. Motivaran?
Go ahead, Mr. Corso.
Good evening, everybody. Yeah, I'm very supportive of this as well. And the question to Mr. Wallen, Chris, I do agree with you as possibly holding this off to the spring because of the winter and salt. But does that pose a problem to this contractor or this individual where we might have to rebid this entire project and slow it down? Or how would that work, Chris?
Historically, we have left contracts open. We just leave the purchase order open. I mean, I haven't had it. If there's something that maybe, if Andrew could tell me later, when we discuss it, but I don't believe we've ever had an issue leaving a contract open. We're not talking about, a lot more different out of scope work that we're trying to backdoor. We're talking about an extension and we're running into weather delays. So as long as we have a mutual agreement that this section of work can be completed next year at the beginning, I don't see anybody having a huge issue with that.
Great. And again, Mr. Mulverin and Ms. Foy, I'm very supportive of this. This would certainly talk about neighborhood revitalization, bring up that community that really needs our support in every way that we can. And again, we set the precedence with Orchard Park, and they did a great job over there. And I just think that this particular street needs our support as well. And I would be fully willing to support whatever we need to do.
Mr. Mudavaren?
Go ahead, Ms. Patrick.
I too would support us doing this. I can't recall though, and I didn't have a chance to go back to my paperwork, but is this in the CDBG funding that we approved? For some reason I felt like we didn't have money for sidewalks, or am I wrong? Anybody?
I don't believe this was in the funding that was approved by the council, but it's still, I mean, we've had this discussion. If the council approves it, we can do it as an amendment. There is CDBG money available, and this is of course an area that the money can be applied to. So
Okay.
I don't see any issues with that.
Thank you.
Mr. Mutavaren?
Go ahead, Mr. Palazzo.
I do think it would be prudent to wait until spring because we wouldn't want to compromise the quality of the product with salt or whatever the case may be. I mean, it's not a screaming emergency. Community builders won't be doing their piece this year. So it seems to me if we all come to agreement on supporting it, that spring makes more sense.
If I may suggest, can we move it out and approve it tonight, pending that Mr. Wallen will take care the rest of the stuff from his office?
So, Mr. Mudavaren,
whenever it's feasible for his office, him and his office to do it, he will proceed.
So, Mr. Mudavaren, I would support it and move it forward, especially if we're going to work at this in the springtime. So, I'd be more than happy to make the motion.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Wallen.
Thank you.
Yeah. The next item is review of guidelines, bylaws for the Civilian Police Review Board with the repeal of 58. Ms. Porterfield.
Yes, thank you. So we've been, we're in we're reimagining and doing police reforms and having those meetings. And the city of Schenectady has a Civilian Police Review Board whose governing legislation is done by the city council. So really, as a council, I really think that we should be taking a look at this and seeing if we, first of all, if it's being really governed by the legislation that's put forward. I know there's a couple of things. One of them is the advisory committee that it says that we should have, and I know that we don't have that. And there's a couple of other things that that the legislation says should be done this way, and I know from having been to meetings, from having feedback from those who are on the review board, that it's not done that particular way. So what I'm suggesting and recommending is that we actually look at the legislation and look at how things are being done currently, and making sure that we are adhering to the legislation. And in terms of the repeal of 50A, I know that some of the documents come highly redacted. And so I would like to have Mr. Holden at this moment just see how that really would impact how the documents that are being seen currently by the Civilian Police Review Board, if that would change how the documents are coming. When you look at the governing legislation, we have the public safety commissioner who should be an ex officio, that the board should be able to go to our law department. So I just want to make sure that those systems are in place so that the people who are volunteers in doing this work have as many resources as possible available to them. And again, that we're doing what we can and what we should be doing actually in terms of the legislation. So that is my request, and again, I know that some of you have said that you've looked at the governing legislation. Oh, and thank you, Ms. Maiku, for sending that out to all of us. But we only have a couple of weeks until we're finished with all the meetings in terms of the police reform, and so this is another part of it. And so I feel as a council we should be ready, or at least be discussing this particular legislation and making our recommendations, or and just as I said, making sure that we're the review board is being conducted based on the legislation that was put forward by this council. So that is my request, that we make sure we take a look at that, Mr. McGarren.
No problem. Ms. Porterfield, were you able to get a copy of the bylaws?
Ms. Michael did send that, so we can, everybody, if she can either forward it to the entire council, and actually it's the governing legislation, which, talks about the bylaws in there, so that everyone can get a copy of that. It's right in our city code. But we can actually, I can actually forward, or Ms. Michael can forward a copy to all the council members.
Okay, thank you. You were asking a question over on Mr. Holden?
Well, my question, Mr. Holden, is in terms of 50A, the repeal of 50A, and how does that impact how the documentation that the review board is currently receiving? Will they now be able to see more information? That's my understanding. Or how will that apply to our Civilian Police Review Board?
That's a great question, Ms. Porterfield. So 50A was repealed. I just want to, it wasn't just the repeal of 50A. 50A was repealed, and there were changes in the Freedom of Information law to specifically address not just police disciplinary records, but also the disciplinary records involving the fire department. It covered both. 50A did, and when it was repealed, there was nothing there. They also, at the same time, the state changed the Freedom of Information law to cover both of those groups. And there are still restrictions in the Freedom of Information law related to records or information that would constitute an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. Those are still that's still protected information that would have to be redacted. Those things include, the information is right there in the FOIL law: social security numbers, telephone numbers, like personal telephone numbers, personal email addresses, things that you wouldn't want to turn over, for yourself. Obviously, we tend to view police officers and firefighters in a different light given their roles and responsibilities. And obviously, the city's still litigating a case involving the Freedom of Information law. I am not 100% certain what the CPRB does receive when they review cases. My plan, Ms. Porterfield, would be to discuss with the Office of Professional Standards what they've been providing. I want to go over it with them. I also want to go over it with the CPRB to discuss, in their position, they're not, even though they're civilians, right? They're members of the public. When they're on the CPRB, there's a certain level of confidentiality with certain records that may or less be a bit more sensitive. So I do want to have that discussion first with the Office of Professional Standards and Chief Clifford, and then also talk to the CPRB, including Chairperson Shave. So I can't give you a definitive answer in terms of what they can get and what they can't get, because I don't know exactly what they have been receiving. And with the change of, obviously, the Freedom of Information Law, and the repeal of 50A, they should, presumably be getting more information. But it would be imprudent right now for me to say, here's what they should be getting, here's what they're actually receiving, because I haven't had that conversation. That's something I plan to do, since you brought it up, over the next week or two, if I can.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Porterfield, are you going to follow up with this, or?
Well, I guess we could bring in Mr. Colin, who said that he will look into that, and then in 2 weeks, we could bring it back to see where we are with that. I see Ms. Patrick's waving me, and I think she has something she wants to say. So I really appreciate Mr. Colin, even if you wanted to forward us that information prior to the meeting, so we would have it available to review for discussion, that would be great. And again, I just recommend that if we could, as a council, as individual council members, take a look at the bylaw or the legislation, which I will forward.
Ms. Patrick, you have
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
And actually, Ms. Porterfield answered one of my questions, but I do think it's important. I went through the whole legislation, I guess, for the Civilian Police Review Board, and had a lot of questions. One of them was around this advisory council that Ms. Porterfield mentioned earlier. So, yes, I don't know when we discuss this, but I think there are things that maybe the rest of the folks know, because you've been on the council, but I definitely think there were things throughout it that I would imagine aren't necessarily happening. The only other question I had was, I feel like Mr. Shave did make a report to the council, and I can't remember whether that was before I was on the council or not, and I was hoping someone could fill me in, because I couldn't find that in any of my emails. Does anyone have that report that Mr. Shave made? I think it was before COVID, but perhaps in 2020. Because I'd like to see that. Anybody remember that?
Mr. Motivator, I do remember, Ms. Patrick, I do remember him making a report, and I do believe it was in 2020. Whether he submitted a written report, I can definitely look back in my records and find out. I don't know, we'll see what he says, but I don't know that necessarily covered how they run the board, which is probably what my question is right now. How it's running in regards to how the legislation say it should be going. So I'm sure we can get that report.
Thank you, because there is even an evaluative component of this that I believe the council, we're supposed to be looking into evaluating the board. So something you brought up, I think, last time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mutivaran.
Go ahead, please.
I just wanted to say to Ms. Patrick that Mr. Shave is highly responsive, and he's very proud of the work that he does, and is more than willing to fill you in. So if you need his contact information, let me know, but I know that he would go over any of your questions with you.
That's a great idea. Thank you. I think I have his contact information from the library.
Okay, good. So, Ms. Porterfield, we'll have us back in 2 weeks on the agenda for us to continue discussion and to share any documents that we may have during the 2 weeks.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Motivaran.
Thank you. The next item is a holdover from several weeks. Police Reform Task Force is just here. On the agenda for any updates from the mayor's office, I don't see Mayor McCarthy on. But I just want to remind the council and the public community meeting is ongoing. Schedule was submitted to us, to the public. I encourage my colleagues, if you have the time, please log into this meeting and let's be part of it. Ms. Porterfield, Mr. Kosha, do you have anything else to add on this line?
Mr. Mudavaren, I want to say that I have been attending the meetings and they're very informative and people are participating. A little bit of feedback that I've gotten, a couple questions how can people see the meetings, and this is for either OSM or for the mayor's office, how can people see the meetings that have already occurred? My understanding, they are being recorded. So for people who can't be on that night, they can go back and actually watch. And up to what point can people submit their questions and comments or, suggestions for police reform? So those are a couple of things that we need to address for the general public. I'm not sure how we put that information out there. Because currently, if you're not on the email list, you don't get the information. So somehow we need to be able to say to the broader community, this is how you can submit your suggestions or concerns, and this is where you can go and view what's already been, the meetings that have already taken place.
Ms. Michael and I can look into that. Maybe we can see if there's any link to any website and we can just add it onto the council. Link it to the council tab on the city website. We can follow. Both of us will follow up on that.
Thank you.
Make it accessible to the public.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Any other business before public safety? I have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, I'd like to call to order government operations. We have 3 items on the agenda. The first item is the discussion of backyard chickens. Ms. Patrick and Mr. Mudavaren.
Yes, thank you. A couple of weeks ago, we added this item on the agenda for us to discuss at the council to see if there's any pathway to change the ordinance to allow backyard chickens. I shared the city of Albany ordinance with regards to backyard chicken and also Ms. Cayuna. I'm hoping that everybody had a chance to read it, and we are going to start a discussion. So what we're looking for is more of a discussion from the council of on what is our position in terms of this. Is this something that we should discuss and move forward with? We need to look at it on a broader scale in terms of the health risks and all the pros and cons with having this ordinance in our city. So basically what we're asking for is open discussion here.
So, Mr. Mudavaren, I'm sorry, Ms. Porterfield.
Oh, okay. So, Mr. Mudavaren, I know that people are very much in favor of this, and I'm not 100% opposed. But however, I do think that in terms of this, we should, hopefully, first of all, we'll be having a public hearing. But in addition to that, we really definitely talk about proximity to property of other individuals. And in addition to that, some people don't have backyards; they have side yards. So I personally don't think a side yard would be an appropriate place for this. A backyard that's fine. It's it's behind the house and not visible to people passing by. But I'm certainly open to discussion. And again, I think that proximity to your neighbors' properties definitely make a difference. And as I understand it, they said there's no roosters, so there would not be a lot of noise, because that was another concern I had, but I guess there won't be any roosters as part of this. So I'm definitely open to the discussion, especially, as people now are growing more food at home. They have vegetable gardens, and people are doing a lot of that for various reasons. So, this would just be another part of it. I guess you can get fresh eggs. And so I'm open to that. I just, again, want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that is respectful of the neighborhoods and the neighbors and those people that live there.
Ms. Porterfield?
Yes. I'm finished. Thank you.
It's your committee, all right?
Yes, Mr. Ralph, go ahead. You said Mr. Motivate before.
And we got I made a mistake. Anyway, Mr. Kosher and I sat down with a couple of community members a year or two ago, and there's been a lot of research done by this group, and I think the group recognizes how important writing a complete legislation that would protect neighbors and neighborhoods and put parameters around this. There's some good solid legislation out there. As always, it would be, all right, well, what, if we have a bad actor, can we follow up on that? Or we're already stressed in departments and things of that nature. But I think really that there's a big community movement. We see how successful the Vale Park Community Garden is. And I think, we have to have some well thought out, thorough legislation. But I think it's a worthy thing to incorporate into our city. And yes, I agree, we would want to get as much public input as possible. Through public hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Palazzo. Anyone else?
Ms. Porterfield?
Mr. Kosher? Oh, Ms. Wallen? Mr. Wallen, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to second Ms. Perrazzo's comment on behalf of city employees. I believe something like this will lead to undoubtedly an increase in calls and workload. I don't know what department you would think this permit would go through. I'm guessing a codes or a zoning, and zoning and codes are kind of one and the same. But I would definitely recommend that we have a little bit of an internal discussion on it, because it's not just going to be the people who have them, but the neighbors of the people who have them. And I can just definitely see, I'll speak for city employees, the workload internally going up quite a bit.
And so, Mr. Wong, in terms of people calling in because they have concerns or because of the issuing of permits, where do you see that workload falling specifically?
Well, someone's going to have to issue the permit. So it's either, I'm guessing it's going to be some kind of a zoning officer permit, because this is going to be zoned. And then you're going to have to, keep the permit. I don't know if there's going to be an inspection in it, but then, if somebody's not keeping their chickens in a cage and the chickens are getting out and walking in the yard, and you have one neighbor saying it about another neighbor, this could, I know that we have a lot of, in the city of Schenectady, a lot of neighbors calling in about other neighbors and leading to neighbor by neighbor disparaging. And we get a lot of calls about this. So I would just make sure, I think the public hearing is a great idea. Let them have it. But, if we're trying to, focus and reduce workload and keep the police at, this just seems like another thing that is going to drain resources that are already thin. But if we want it, I'm not an elected official. I'm just kind of speaking on behalf of City Hall from what I can see. We'll get calls in engineering. I know we're going to get calls on engineering, and then we're going to have to direct them to people.
Well, no, thank you for that input, because that is another, in terms of, as we're looking at, moving forward, or taking a look at this, we need to be able to look at it from all angles, so I appreciate your input on that.
Okay.
Is that Ms. Sulewski Alzumith?
Yes,
Yes.
I echo Mr. Wallen's concerns as far as adding to the workload, and if someone's building their own chicken area, that who's going to inspect it, is what are the minimums going to be, and I would I'm not saying no, I don't want chickens, but I would say that maybe we start very, very slow with this. And, I know they were in Vale Park, and I don't know if maybe we could do some sort of another pilot program and maybe keep them to the park where there's enough parks throughout the city, and do some sort of, like we do with the gardens throughout the city. I would hate for us to start a process where there's added workload to anyone already in the city that's working and doing a great job, and having to add on to what they currently do. So I appreciate Mr. Wallen's speaking up, because that was going to be one of my concerns. So thank you, Mr. Wallen.
Ms. Porterfield?
Ms. Patrick?
Yes, thank you. So I really want to thank the folks that did bring this forward. We've heard from a group that you all had heard previously about the chickens, but we've also gotten concerned. I've gotten notifications and emails from folks that are on the opposite side of the fence. I did a lot of research on this over the last few weeks, and again, in part, some of the materials that I have came to us from our advocates for the backyard poultry farming, which is the official name. And I literally have, like this huge folder of things that I've gone through. So I have a lot of information and I do have some concerns. So when we do get to talk about this, I have more to say, but I do think that the timing in terms of COVID, I have some concerns about that. I have a lot of concerns around the code inspection, the items that Mr. Wallen and Ms. Walzunas just brought up, because it's not just, they would have to actually go out and inspect the building of the structures as well, from everything that I've read from other cities, other municipalities. So there's a lot to be hammered out. Again, I'm not saying I'm totally opposed to it either, but I do think there's many, many issues to think about, and I'm happy to share those when we have a longer discussion about this.
Ms. Porterfield?
Yes, Mr. Palomini.
I also think we have a number of public health issues that we need to consider with this as well. While they may be minor in probability, the fact is if they do occur, it could have spread very quickly, and there's issues that arise from this, from various animal diseases to groundwater issues. There are a number of public health issues that, quite frankly, Schenectady really isn't prepared for, should they occur. And the amount of people I've heard from on this opposed to it is substantial. Matter of fact, people were laughing that we would consider this, because it's one thing to have a garden, it's another thing to, chickens aren't like cows, but have livestock in your backyard. Like I said, and these are individuals who unfortunately probably won't participate in a public hearing. As we all know, there are people who, for either opposed or for, won't participate in a public hearing, but very much opposed to this, that they were. And I think there's a number of issues that we really need to be concerned with. And, should we have anything, maybe to one of the suggestions, I forget who brought it up, but have a couple places in various parks around the city as a co-op type deal, but in backyards, I would be opposed to that.
I'm sorry, may I make another comment, Ms. Porterfield?
Yes, go ahead.
I do want to say that I think there are some alternatives and some creative strategies, including some that were shared with us by the advocates, which included pilots, included sort of a cap on the number of permits that might get issued. I second what you were saying, Ms. Porterfield, in that one of the things that I read in some of the materials would be that you'd have to have, neighbor acceptance of this from all sides around you in terms of people agreeing that this would be okay for you to do this, that could also, on the flip side of that, lead to some disputes among neighbors or between neighbors, which we probably wouldn't want to have happen. But, I mean, there is a whole lot for us to consider. So I just leave it at that. And I appreciate everyone discussing it.
So, Ms. Patrick and Mr. Mudavaren, what is your desire in moving forward with this?
Well, we're bringing it here for discussion, a good discussion this evening, and I think what we'll do, we'll have it back on the agenda so we could continue any more discussion that we may have. Look at the suggestion from Mr. Palomini and Ms. Karen. Those are suggestions are valuable. I mean, we do have community garden. Why not do something like that also with these chickens? So those are the comments. That's the reason why we have it on the agenda to discuss it, so that we're able to flush out ideas on with regards to backyard chicken. We're moving it to a co-op, as Ms. Palomini mentioned. We'll have it back for this. We'll have it back for continued discussion and see what we can do to address it.
And I think those are good ideas, but again, it has to do with proximity for me, since I know that there's, some people who live further away than other people. They're like in more urban, well, the inner city part of Schenectady, the houses are closer together. There are some people whose homes aren't as close together. So I think that, having it at a specific place is good, but if there's individuals whose properties allow, I think, again, like behind the house, I think that that's something we should consider as well. We should, so we should take all of these things into consideration as we move forward. Is there any other question, are there any other questions or any other input on this right now? Okay, then. All right, then we'll bring it back in 2 weeks. Thank you very much. The second item on our agenda is for discussion of hiring outside contractors to do OGS work instead of using staff. Ms. Peraza.
Thank you. I don't think it can be a discussion without some representation here that can answer some of these questions, but I will brief the council. I received several phone calls from different departments with concerns, and so I asked for this to be on the agenda, and I asked for Mr. LaFawn to be present to answer some questions. But the mayor's office suggested that I call the mayor's office or Mr. LaFawn directly. Why did I want to discuss this publicly? The reason I want to discuss this publicly is the items of concern have direct impact on our city budget, and I think that the residents of the city deserve answers. I'm disappointed that the mayor is also not on the call to speak on behalf of Mr. LaFawn, but I will ask that this comes back on the agenda again. It's my understanding that we're sending out small engine repair to a local business when we have a staff member that covers that small engine repair. We've hired a tree contractor to do tree removal when we have several operators that have done tree removal and are willing and able to do tree removal. We have farmed out vehicles to local dealerships and auto mechanics. Now this, again, without somebody here to answer it, I can't say that this is actually happening, but I would like some answers to these questions. I've heard that we're sending vehicles to dealerships and privately owned mechanics instead of using our own people. And what's very concerning to me and probably has the biggest impact on the budget is because of some of the management choices in the fact that we're asking union people to do other union people's jobs and this and that we have a lot of grievances. The grievances sit there until they hit arbitration, which then costs both the union and the city money because we can't come to an agreement prior to arbitration. And in the last two, the city has lost. And so then it's also my understanding, and this is a question maybe for Mr. Colden or the mayor or whatever, that then the city is responsible for all of the legal costs of that arbitration, which is $10,000, which again is what has been reported to me. So I want to brief my colleagues on this. I would like to request that it's on the agenda in 2 weeks. Again, it's of concern to me that we're paying our people that have time to do this work, but yet we're also paying outside people. And I don't understand why that's happening. So I think council as a whole and the residents of this city deserve answers to those questions. So we'll actually get 2 weeks and actually have someone attend the meeting to answer questions, and not be told not to attend the meeting.
Does anyone have any questions regarding Ms. Peraza's comments? Okay, so what will Ms. Peraza, what I'd like to do is to put this back on the agenda.
Ms. Porterfield, I'm sorry. I'm a little slow to unmute.
Go right ahead, Ms. Peraza.
So I do want to comment on some of the outsourced work as far as the trees were concerned. I know that we had a major storm several weeks ago, and we were not able to keep up. And I know some of the removal of trees had to be outsourced because we did not have the capacity or ability to remove a lot of these, damaged trees. So I know that some of that work was definitely outsourced, but I felt it made sense based on, Central Parkway was closed down for, I want to say 3 days because of the amount of tree damage that was done. There were, trees on houses. I mean, it was, we had, I personally was without power for 3.5 days. So I know that they were very busy, and I know our city employees were, but I know that they just couldn't handle it all. So I know that some tree work had to have been outsourced out to get the work done.
Ms. Porterfield?
Yes, Ms. Peraza.
Yes, that was part of the discussion with them, and I agree that sometimes when we have a situation where the city was really decimated from the storm, that we have to bring in outside help. But the point remains that we had employees that were available also to help with that work, and we outsourced the entire amount, or the lion's share of it, from what I'm told. Again, I can't, without somebody here to answer me. But there were employees that were willing and ready and able and qualified to help with that work that weren't utilized. So I just want to make that clear.
Anyone else? Yeah, Mr. Mudavaren.
Yeah, so we'll have this back on the agenda. Hopefully we have the mayor and Mr. LaFont in the next 2 weeks to help to address some of these concerns.
That would be awesome. And in addition to that, I think we should also have what it costs us to actually do that particular cleanup, so we can see what the impact was on our budget versus how we could have lowered the impact, understanding that we definitely needed help, but how did it impact us not utilizing the current employees that we have on staff? So I think that part, it should be part of the discussion as well. So we will bring it back in 2 weeks. Okay. And the last item on our agenda is the appointment to the DSIC board, and that is Mayor McCarthy. Is there anyone on the call to speak to that? Mr. Colden?
Nothing's been relayed to me, Ms. Porterfield.
I think Ms. Peterson is still on the call.
Yeah, but she's not on the agenda to discuss this.
Oh, okay.
Okay. This is the agenda item it's been put on unbelievable by the mayor's office. So we can just bring that back in 2 weeks, and the mayor can, have that discussion with us. Is there anything else to come before government operations? All right, seeing nothing, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second. Ms. Patrick, I believe.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
So I'd like to open up city planning and development, and the first item on the agenda is call for a public hearing. And Mr. Colden, I believe this is your agenda item.
Yes. Last week I sent to the council the proposed language. I just want to make sure everybody received the proposed language. So the italicized language were additions are additions to the code. Obviously, the language that was struck through are words that we would be deleting. Obviously, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have prior to next Monday's public hearing.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
I'm sorry, I thought we already called for this public hearing. This is just a reminder?
Yeah, it's a reminder, Ms. Peraza. The council's already passed a resolution for the public hearing. The public hearing, I think Ms. Michael put it on there just as a reminder for the fact that it is next Monday.
So do we need the motion still?
No.
No motions needed.
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the rest of the items are in executive session, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. Has to do with property sales.
Sales, so I would entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.